If you've never had hot cross buns before, you should really give them a try this Easter. These are not your traditional buns. They are filled with raisins and a nice cinnamon spice. They are sweet from that sugary glaze that goes on top, and they're super fluffy. They pair nicely with an afternoon coffee or for a sweet treat after dinner. Although these most commonly are made for Easter, they can really be enjoyed any time of the year. The first step to making these buns is to soak the raisins in some warm water. You want to rehydrate the raisins a little bit so that when they go and bake, they don't become just extra dry and, lose their texture completely. It doesn't take long to rehydrate them. You soak them in warm water for about 10 minutes and then they'll be ready to use. The next step is to activate the yeast. So I will be using dry active yeast in this recipe, and in order to, activate it and get it working, we need to combine it with something it'll eat, such as sugar and some sort of warm liquid. So here I'm warming up milk. I will put some butter in it too because we need melted butter. I do this because I figured the residual heat from the milk will melt the butter. It also saves me from having to dirty another dish, which I really try to keep to a minimum in the kitchen, seeing as I have a bunch of kids who dirty many dishes all the time. My dishwasher is constantly full. I quickly threw this in the microwave to melt. I'm just stirring it to melt the remainder of the butter, and then I will add the yeast and the sugar. So I added it to the mixing bowl here. I will be using my KitchenAid to knead this dough. It'll just speed up the process for me and allow me to do other tasks while the machine works for me. But you could also do this by hand, so don't feel like you have to have some fancy appliance to complete this recipe. Here I'm adding 2¼ teaspoons of yeast. I always keep a large quantity of yeast on hand, but if you don't commonly make bread recipes, you could get the little packages of yeast, and one full package will be used for this recipe. Next, I will add something for the yeast to feed off of, so that'll be sugar. I'm putting a tablespoon of sugar here, and I want to do this while I activate the yeast because it'll really help speed up the process. Mix these ingredients together, and then we will wait about 10 minutes and watch the yeast foam. Here's a time lapse of the yeast foaming, and that tells me my yeast is alive and ready to be used. My raisins have finished soaking, so I'm just going to drain the water. This will make them ready to use for the next step of making the dough. There are other dried fruits that you could add to this dough. You could also add candied orange. Now, I only had this one orange left, so I thought I would just use some of the orange juice to soak the raisins in. That way it would get a bit of a citrusy flavor, which I thought would just be a nice touch. I didn't want to use the whole orange because the baby wanted some of it as well, so I thought I'd give her half and then I'd add the juices from the other half to these raisins. She just woke up from nap time and, wanted a quick snack. Next, I'm going to add the rest of the wet ingredients. So I have an egg here. I will also add the remainder of the sugar. This is a sweet bun, so it has, a decent amount of sugar in it. It's not something that you would normally make a sandwich with. It's more of a dessert. Once I get these wet ingredients quickly mixed together, I will go and add the dry ingredients to form the dough. I always make sure to weigh out my ingredients here just because it's more accurate, so I have everything on a scale. But you could use cups as well. Just make sure to fluff up your flour before you do. I would really err on the side of too little than too much. You don't want to add too much flour to the dough because then it'll be dry. It's better to have to add more afterwards. And it's easy to incorporate more flour to get the final texture that you're looking for. I had to refill my flour jar here. I have a couple glass jars that I fill with flour that I keep close by in the kitchen. And then I have a much larger quantity that I keep in a closet so that I can go and refill it when necessary. Next, I'm adding the salt. Do not forget the salt. It is a very important step. Any bread product will definitely not taste very good without the salt. And finally, I'm going to add the spices. So here I'm opening up some cinnamon. So I had this really nice Ceylon cinnamon. This is true cinnamon with all its natural benefits. I would really recommend using this instead of the cassia cinnamon, which you would normally find in grocery stores. You just have to search a bit further for it. I am going to grate some fresh nutmeg now. So I do recommend using fresh nutmeg, but if you only have ground nutmeg, that will do as well. And finally, I am going to add 5 spices to it. So this is just a variety of spices. I think it's really important to have clove though. So if you don't have the 5 spices, just make sure to add some clove as well. And now I'll put it in the KitchenAid and I will let this run for about 6 minutes. I will check on it here and there and make sure that it's coming to the right consistency. I want it to be a fairly wet dough. This way it will rise nicely and it will be nice and airy in my final product. I don't want it to be a dense dough ball. This dough smells so sweet and delicious, and I have these little hands constantly trying to grab little bites of this dough. Towards the end, I will incorporate the raisins. The reason I'm making these buns is because my kids have been requesting for so long that I make them. We have a nursery rhyme book that we read at night, and I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there's a nursery rhyme about hot cross buns. So 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. If you have no daughters, give them to your sons. 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. I've had to say this rhyme to my kids at nighttime before putting them to bed many days, and they keep saying, "Mommy, why haven't you made some hot cross buns?" So this is actually my first attempt making hot cross buns. I've made similar products, but I really wanted to, make them the traditional hot cross buns that are from the nursery rhyme. I'm just covering the dough here. It's a sticky dough, and I'll leave it to rise for about an hour and a half, somewhere warm in the kitchen. So just a bit of a history lesson here. These hot cross buns are made for Easter because the cross on the buns signify the crucifixion, and the spices signify Jesus's burial spices. Although they are rooted in the Christian faith, they are buns that can certainly be enjoyed by everyone and anyone. The next step here is to shape these buns. So I just took out the dough. I'm going to form it into a bit of a ball. I'm going to kind of press it down to get rid of any potential air bubbles. And I'm now dividing it into 12 different sections. I'm trying to make them even. My husband was walking by and could not resist taking a piece of dough for himself. That's okay. I did try to make all these dough balls relatively the same size. I don't mind if they're slightly off. But if you want them to be uniform and, perfect in size, then you should weigh each ball out. So here's how we shape the dough balls. What you do is you grab one and you sort of pinch all of the exterior sides into the center. So that's what I'm doing here. And then I usually try to push it through my thumb and my other finger just to sort of tighten it. I'll place it down on a slightly floured surface, and I'm going to roll it with my fingers that are pressing on my countertop there. It'll tighten the ball, and then once that happens, you can put it in the pan. Make sure they're evenly spaced. I did go and spray this pan with some avocado oil so that they wouldn't stick after I bake them. I will repeat this step 12 times until all of these dough balls are formed. And really, that was probably the most work that I will have to do to make these hot cross buns. Then put a cloth on it and let these rest until they rise or double in size. During that time, I'll prepare just the final elements. So here I'm beating an egg in a bowl because we will want to give these an egg wash to give them a nice golden finish. Next, I'll prepare the flour and water that I will use to make the cross. So it's very simple. It's just some flour that I mix in several tablespoons of water. It's a relatively thick paste, and I'm going to put it in a Ziploc bag. I don't have any piping bags on hand, but a Ziploc bag or any sort of, bag that you can cut a hole in the corner will do. So I'll just fold it over so that I can really get the paste into the corner pocket there. So that way I don't have any air bubbles that will, sort of mess up the piping process. I love experimenting with new dough recipes, especially ones that I'm not super familiar with. And I really like to have recipes that incorporate a lot of cinnamon. I think that's a delicious flavor profile to add to dough, and they really just enhance the flavor. So I was really excited to give these a try. Now that the dough is risen and it smells immaculate, my kitchen is starting to smell really good, and I can't wait to smell it once it's baking. It's time to put on the egg wash. I somehow, I don't know, a long time ago, I seem to have lost the actual stick for my brush, so I just used the brush part. But luckily that's all I really need to put the egg wash on. I'm sure one of my kids took it and hid it somewhere. Maybe I'll get a new one soon. Maybe not. This works fine. So I just make sure to brush it evenly over all of the rolls. And next I'll get to piping the flour paste onto the dough balls. This is the cross element. So I do this a little slowly, but honestly, it was very easy and very simple. Just make sure not to cut your hole too large. You don't want it to become, a sticky mess. So I like to do a continuous pattern. I know some people just do a cross on one bun at a time, but I found this look nicer, to the aesthetic was what I was going for at this point. So I just quickly pipe that cross on, and once I do that, that's the final step before I put it in the oven. I already have my oven preheated to 425 degrees. These will take about 20 minutes to cook, but you're looking for an internal temperature of about 205 degrees. You can always use a digital thermometer to check the temperature before fully deciding if they're done. Pulling them out of the oven, I'm very pleased with how they look, and there's just one last step, which is to add the glaze. So they're nicely browned and golden, and my house smells delicious at this point. I'm just using some icing sugar, and I'll add some water to it to form the glaze. You want it to be very runny so that it gets absorbed into the buns, and it'll leave that glossy finish on top, which really gives them this beautiful look. So I'm just mixing this together, and then I'll spoon it lightly over all the buns. It's a nice element of sweetness, but my son did not like touching them after this because they made his hands very sticky. Nevertheless, I cut it into little bite-sized pieces for him, and he was very satisfied. So you want to make sure to use all this glaze. I'm just going to run the brush over it to make sure it's got on all of the buns and all the nooks and crannies there. And here they are, ready to be served. I highly recommend trying them while they are warm and somewhat fresh out of the oven. So I am going to serve these to my family. Everyone is waiting to try them. They've been very excited all day. I'll serve my 3 kids first, and then I'll take one for myself. My husband was busy at this point, but I will definitely save one for him to try when he is free. These buns come apart easily. You could also pull them apart too, but I was using a spatula here. And here is the taste test, which will be the true tell of whether these were as delicious as they looked. So pulling it open, I can see that they are nice and soft and light and fluffy inside. They have a good amount of raisins, but I actually think I would add some more next time. I think we would all enjoy just a little bit more. They're delicious. I was very impressed. The spices really gave you a nice kick, and they were not too sweet, so I could indulge in them but not feel like I had this overwhelming sugar rush. I hope you give this recipe a try this Easter and your family enjoys it as much as mine did.